Hello everyone, a warm welcome to the discussion of Step Up series, and my name is Pradeep. I'll be discussing the history related questions. So let's get started straight away. Question number 3. Bring out various ways in which nationalism manifested itself during the colonial rule. Right? So, in this question, they are asking you the various ways in which the nationalism got expressed. Fine. So, in the introduction part, we can begin by giving the definition of nationalism. So, nationalism, you can say, it is an ideology or the movement with the intention of protecting the nation's sovereignty over the resources and to make sure that its resources are utilized for the benefit of the homeland. So, you can briefly say the definition of nationalism and then you can jump into the body part. And in the body part, you can write about the various forms of nationalism. For example, you can write about the revolutionary nationalism, the role played by the various revolutionaries of Anushilan Samiti and the members of HSRA, IRA. You can mention all of their activities and then you can go ahead. In the next part, you can write about the moderate or liberal nationalism. Here you can write about the various pre-Congress political organizations like Bengal British India Society, Indian Association. So these organizations, they mainly focused on gaining some minor reforms to the administration and also to the legislature. Fine. Increasing the representation, Indianization of civil services, reduce the drain. They were content with just the reforms to the existing setup. That's the reason we call them as liberal nationalism. So later, even moderates and the Liberal Federation of India, even they followed this kind of approach. Fine. And then you can also say the next one, liberation nationalism. Those who wanted to liberate this country, not through the revolutionary methods but through the other methods. So under this method we can talk about extremists, various activities of like the Gandhian movement, NCM, CDM, Quit India movement. So all these things can be characterized under liberation nationalism. And next part, you can talk about the cultural nationalism. So utilizing cultural elements to promote the nationalism or establishing our culture as the central theme, because Britishers tried to subjugate even our culture. So they denied us of our past glory. They denied us the glory of our culture, our civilization, etc. Therefore, establishing the greatness of our civilization, our languages, our culture, that was cultural nationalism. And you can see the major contribution was given by the Indian Society of Oriental Arts. This was the organization that was established during Swadeshi movement under the leadership of Abanindranath Tagore. So the portrait of Mother India. Fine. So all these things, and then literary works like Vande Mataram as a part of the book Anand Mat written by Bankim Chandra Chatterjee. So this was a source of inspiration, and also one of the institutions that acted as a source of inspiration for Indian Society of Oriental Arts was Shanti Niketan, that was set up by Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore. So all these elements together, to summarize, revolutionary nationalism, liberation nationalism, liberal nationalism, and cultural nationalism. And also you can write about the economic nationalism as well. So, how the extremists during Swadeshi movement promoted establishment of indigenous industries as a part of their Atma Shakti or self-reliance. Today, we have the concept of Atmanirbhar Bharat, but 115, 120 years ago, there was a concept of Atma Shakti or self-reliance that was promoted by the extremists. They wanted to set up indigenous industries so that which can provide an alternative goods as a replacement to the goods of the British industries. Fine. And also later, you can talk about Khadi and Charaka. Khadi and Charaka. And in the later years, you can see the evolution of various Indian capitalists, the laborers and the peasants demanding more and more socialistic kind of reforms. So all these things indicate the form of economic nationalism. Write all these things and you can conclude. Because of the culmination of the synergy of all these elements, India gained its independence in 1947. Fine. So it was not just one method which got us independence. All these things together, their forces got synergized and they led us in the path of independence. Okay. So by saying this, we can conclude the discussion of question number 3. Question number 4. Despite high hopes, Shimla Agreement of 1972 failed to live up to its initial promise. Do you agree? And give reasons for your argument. So this is the question. And you all know that Shimla Agreement was signed between the Indian and the Pakistani leadership after the war of 1971, where India successfully liberated Bangladesh. So after this war, between Benazir Bhutto and Honorable Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, this agreement was signed. So this can be your introduction, and later we'll have to talk about the various features or the important elements of Shimla Agreement. So Shimla Agreement mainly talked about resolving the tensions between India and Pakistan. So first one, bilateral discussion to sort out all the issues, bilateral discussion, and increasing people to people contact, and not violating the line of control, respecting the line of control. Fine. So both the parties agreed not to violate it. And on top of it, there was kind of punch-shield factors like non-interference in each other's internal elements, and avoiding conflict, and also making sure the continuous contact or confidence building measures between India and Pakistan. So all these things were the part of Shimla Agreement. But despite having all these factors, Shimla Agreement failed to live up to its expectation, because the first thing, for normalizing the relationship, first it has to start with trade. But the trade between India and Pakistan has severely declined and it has come down to a minimal level. Fine. That is one thing. And Pakistan's policy of promoting the insurgent or militancy activities in Jammu and Kashmir, and Pakistan's frequent request for the third party led negotiation. So Pakistan is like, earlier when USA was its good friend, it was requesting India, it was urging for the talks with USA in between, India and Pakistan, with USA as the kind of observer or the resolver or the arbitrator of the dispute. And now it is asking for the mediation by China. So because of all these factors, and you also know like frequent border aggressions and the terror activities, all these things are derailing the fundamental tenets of Shimla Agreement. And also we can easily observe that India stuck to its side of the argument. So whatever it has promised, it delivered, like release of prisoners of war, giving back the captured area of like around 1,540 square kilometer to Pakistan, and not indulging in any like ceasefire violation activities as it was mandated by United Nations Security Council. Fine. But Pakistan had not held to its side of promise. That is what is leading to the problems. So you can say like in the conclusion part, in order to neutralize or normalize the relations, in order to neutralize the tensions, the government can start by normalizing the trade and also frequent meetings between the heads of the state or the Prime Minister of India along with the Prime Minister of Pakistan, like the frequent interactions between the top level dignitaries that can increase the bonhomie or the understanding between the leadership, and that can help us resolving any conflict in a peaceful and amicable way. So in conclusion part, you can write that. This concludes the discussion of question number 4. Question number 12. Trace the series of events that led to partition of India. Do you think it could have been avoided? And give justification to your arguments. So events that led to the partition of India, you have to just trace the various incidents of divide and rule policy advocated by the Britishers. So in the introduction part, you can write the Hindu-Muslim unity factor, especially in the revolt of 1857, shook the foundations of the British Empire in India, and therefore Britishers made it their first priority to break the unity between Hindus and Muslims so that they can perpetually rule India. And this led to institutionalization of two things. One, divide and rule policy. Second one, state-sponsored communalism. So now you can start tracing the events. This can be your introduction, whatever I told before. So now you can start tracing the events. The first most important event is, in return for the British support to establishment of Aligarh Muslim University, Britishers brought us loyalty, and using that loyalty, Britishers showcased that entire Muslim community has sided with the Britishers, and that led to attack on many cow slaughterhouses, etc. in the various parts of the country, especially in the decade of 1880s. So this is when they started experimenting with the divide and rule policy, and in later years, partition of Bengal. Fine, partition of Bengal. So Hindu majority West Bengal and Muslim majority East Bengal. This was another major step, and after this, British support to the formation of Muslim League. That was another milestone. This was deliberately intended to keep the Muslim masses away from the national movement and to bring the rift between Hindus and Muslims. And the first major manifestation of their intentions can be seen in the Act of 1909, Indian Council Act of 1909, separate communal electorate for Muslims. So this was the major event. And after this, you can note the continuation of separate communal electorate through the Act of 1919, Act of 1935, and even extension that clearly showcases the British intent of dividing and ruling the Indian society. And also, during the Wavell Plan, even during the August Declaration of 1940, August Offer of 1940, they included the term consent of minorities. So thereby they gave a kind of veto power to Muslim League. And even during the Wavell Plan, they told equal representation to Hindus and Muslims in Viceroy's Executive Council. Fine. So this clearly showcases their intent of pitting Hindus and Muslims against each other. And after this, in the Cabinet Mission Plan, you can see the religion-based grouping of the Indian provinces. Group A, Hindu majority provinces, Madras, Bombay, etc. Group B, Muslim majority provinces in the west like NWFP, Baloch, Punjab, etc. Group C, Muslim majority provinces in the east, Bengal, Assam. Okay. So like that they clearly manifested these things, and apart from that, the communal politics of Jinnah, like in March 1929, he demanded 14 points, and later in 1940, they passed Pakistan Day resolution. Due to the frustration they suffered because of the dismal defeat or the dismal performance in the provincial elections of 1937. So, and later 1946, call for direct action day by the Jinnah. So all these things eventually led to the partition of this country. And do you agree it could have been avoided? Yes, the partition could have been avoided, given the fact if the nationalist leadership had been aware of the British intentions. Second one, if INC would have been successful in attracting and mobilizing the Muslim masses in support of national movement. Fine. Third point, if INC had been successful in forging more agreements or more relationship with the Muslim masses, like Lucknow Pact, Khilafat Bond, there could be more such arrangements or more such agreements, so that Muslim masses could have been an active participants in the national movement. Next point, you can say, like, if Nehru had not opposed the religion-wise grouping in the cabinet mission, that became the bone of contention between INC and Muslim League. And when Nehru opposed it, Muslim League withdrew its support to the cabinet mission plan. Later they joined it, but again, in between, Jinnah had clearly expressed its intention of having separate Pakistan. So it could have been avoided given these factors. And you can justify partition had become inevitable because of large-scale communal riots. So every day, hundreds and thousands were getting killed. And second point, you can say reluctance of the Muslim masses. And in the conclusion part, you can say, so it was a very unfortunate event, partition, and followed by the war with Pakistan. It was one of the most bloodiest chapters in the history of India. So millions of the masses lost their lives while crossing over the border, and millions of them were killed in the communal riots that accompanied the partition. So it could have been avoided if Britishers had not propagated this policy of state-sponsored communalism, or if they had not put forward the divide and rule strategy. So you can mention that, and you can even add a catchphrase, Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, Sabka Vishwas. Right? So this can be an apt conclusion for this question. Let's move on to the next question. Tribal movements during the British rule were the most frequent, militant and violent of all the movements. Elaborate on the statement, giving the reasons for the same. So in introduction part, you have to write what are the tribal movements. So when Britishers came to India, you can define the tribals. So tribals are the community who live in relative isolation, like in the far stretches of forest, in the upper reaches of mountains, or in the islands, and they have distinct culture, language and identity, and they are usually close to nature, and they follow the primitive methods. This can be apt introduction, and this relative isolation was eroded off because of the following reasons. So definition of tribals and the following reasons. So what are the reasons? See, I'll give you a small diagram, and you can use it with regard to any question that can be asked pertaining to tribal revolts. Okay. So reasons or the causes of tribal revolts. The first thing, forest laws and land revenue policies. Fine. So introduction of forest laws and land revenue policies. And because of which, see, tribals, they could not access minor forest produce, and because of introduction of land revenue policy, so they started demanding revenue in the form of cash, and also uh, their methods of slash and burn or shifting cultivation, all those things were banned. Tribals were banned from even hunting, and Britishers even started collecting the grazing fee from them. This is one thing. And then introduction of forest law and land revenue policy also led to the introduction or influx of outsiders in the tribal areas. Outsiders in the tribal areas. Zamindars, money lenders, revenue and forest officials. So all of them, they exploited the innocence and illiteracy of the tribals. Tribals became eventually indebted, landless, fine. So, and also they were transformed into bonded laborers, and they were frequently forced to perform forced labor, and many of them were made indentured laborers, fine. So they lost their means of livelihood. See, for tribals, forest is the only source of livelihood, they know, and Britishers stopped them from even accessing the minor forest produce. They monopolized. And also the transformation of forest. So tribals, they worshipped forest, but Britishers, they started destroying the sacred groves, and they started commercial exploitation of forest resources, timber, wood for making the railway tracks. There used to be a wood between the metal rails. So that one, to make the railway coaches, to build their palaces, for example, Buckingham Palace. So all these things, they commercialize the forest resources, and also interference in the activities of tribals, their practices of rituals, animal sacrifice, human sacrifice, and then activities of religious conversion. So all these things together led to many tribal revolts. And it's true, tribal revolts were very frequent starting from 1770s, 1780s, and they were violent because they did not know any other method. They did not know how to pray, how to petition, or how to put forward their grievances to the Britishers. They only knew one method, that was violence, revolting. They were illiterates and innocents. It was usually directed against the immediate oppressor like Zamindar, the revenue collector, the forest official, etc. And many a times they revolted for protecting their cultural aspects. They resisted their conversion activities, imposition of entry of outsiders. For example, Santals, they revolted against Dikus, outsiders, fine. They revolted to protect their culture, their system of common land holding, fine. So, and these people, they were backward, they did not have modern and sophisticated weapons, and that is the reason they were defeated. So, in the conclusion part, you can write, starting from the revolts witnessed in Chuar in 1760s till the Rampa rebellion of 1920s, these tribal revolts, they kept the spirit of resistance alive against the Britishers. So, you can mention this. Okay. Let's move on to the discussion of question number 14. The causes, strategies, and consequences of the world wars remain the matters of the contemporary concern. Comment. So, the world wars, two global wars, 1914 to 1918, and then 1939 to 1945. You can mention them, and also you can also mention the Cold War era as well. Okay. So now, next part, what were the causes for these world war? And in the introduction part, you can make a small innovation. You can write about the rising tensions in the between China and Taiwan, Russia and Ukraine. You can mention that as a context, and you can come to the body part. That would be also an apt way of introducing this question. In the body part, we can talk about the hyper-nationalism that existed between the world wars, Nazism, fascism, etc. Next, we can talk about the severe trade rivalry that existed between UK and also Germany before the First World War. Fine. So they started fighting for the resources and the colony. That is what led to the First World War. And later, you can talk about the military blocs that were formed: Axis powers, Allied powers, Triple Alliance, Triple Entente, and also ignoring the interests of minorities. That was the reason which sparked the World War One, like between Serbia and Austria. That was the reason. And also during the World War II also, before the World War II, like the genocide of Jews in Germany, that was one of the reasons. And later, the failure of the peace measures, the League of Nations was not competent enough to control the aggression of the various powers like Germany, Italy, and it did not have that mandate itself because USA did not join it in the initial days itself. So that's the reason, failure of the peace measures. And later, you can also say the ideological conflicts. So the dictatorial forces versus the democratic forces. So all these things clearly caused the world wars. And even in the modern day context, these things are still prevalent. You have to bring in the relevance of these elements in the modern day context. For example, like extreme nationalism. You can talk about the Crimean acquisition of Crimea by Russia. So that is one thing. And later, the trade rivalry. You can talk about US and China trade rivalry. And if you talk about the military blocs, you can say now the existence of NATO, Quad, etc. that you can talk. And the failure of the policy measures or the global organizations. You can talk about it as how it has failed in preventing the Russia-Ukraine crisis. Fine. So you can give the contemporary examples to support these arguments. And later, you can talk about how these things, they impacted the world. One, Cold War. Next one, decolonization. Next one, it led to various proxy wars during the Cold Wars, and also emergence of new world economic order led by Bretton Woods institutions. And then it also led to the formation of military blocs in the post World War II times, during the Cold War times, Warsaw Pact, NATO, CENTO, CETO, etc. And also it also led to the nuclear race, like between USSR and USA in the beginning, and later it got spread to different nations. Now North Korea, Iran, India, Pakistan, so all these nations are engaged in the arms race. So this is the context. So by mentioning this, you can easily conclude about, you can write about NAM or Panchsheel in the conclusion part, how respecting each other's sovereignty, not interfering in each other's internal disputes, how all this can enable a peaceful and amicable solution to almost all the crises, and how it can bring about welfare and development of especially the third world countries. Fine. So mentioning this, you can conclude the discussion of this question. Thank you.